Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. Great to see you. Just kind of working through the details here. If any of you know me, you know all technology stuff is a little wild. I'm working through all of the details. Hopefully, you all can see me. I really appreciate it. We're going to give everybody another 15, 20 seconds to log on here, and then we are going to get started talking about E2 visa renewals. Very exciting. It's already 11:31. Let's do it. If for some reason you need to leave early or you come late, just know that you can always watch this on YouTube. We'll be keeping a recording there. With that started, let's talk a little bit about the E2 renewals. So, if you already have an E2 visa, that is amazing and exciting, and we're thrilled to have you in the US running your business. But what happens on renewal? So, let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, what is your renewal date? So there's going to be two dates that are really important in the world of E2, right? The first date is the date that is printed on your visa as the expiration date. That is the date that you will no longer be able to enter the United States after that expiration date, no longer be able to enter the United States without a new visa. However, there's a second date, as most of you know, called the I-94 date. And that date controls how long you can stay in the United States. So if you enter the United States before your visa expires, your I-94 date may go longer than the visa expiration date, and you can stay in the United States as long as the I-94 number is valid. It's a little bit confusing and weird. If you already have a US visa, you're probably familiar with it. If not, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it helps to have a real live example using real live dates to kind of figure out when you can be in the US, when you can enter as an E2, and how long you can stay as an E2. So if you have any specific questions about that, obviously, please feel free to reach out and we can talk about your I-94 date and your visa expiration date. But just know that you may have extra time after your visa expires that you can still stay in the US without renewing the visa. A little bit of time, but it will probably limit the travel that you have. So if you have any questions about when you must renew that visa, let me know. Happy to walk you through that. So the second item to think about when you're talking about renewal is what country are you from? So as you may have experienced, USCIS and the Department of State runs all of the embassies and consulates around the world. They have kind of different ideas about the different documentation that they want to see when you renew. So each consulate will ask for somewhat different things. The main things that most consulates want to see will be the marginality and the real and operating documents. Those are going to be really important, and they want to see about any changes that have come to the business since you first were approved. Okay, those are going to be the three main things that they stick to. So let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, let me back up for a second. There are some countries that will require the entire application again, including the original ownership, the original source of funds, the original evidence of investment, all of those things. Not all consulates require that. For instance, South Korea is one that will require almost an entirely new application every single time you apply. Many consulates do not want the entire thing, they want an updated version, okay? So it really depends a lot on where you're from as far as the documents. But the thing that they're really going to be concentrating on, as we mentioned, any sort of change in ownership or business, the marginality requirement, and the real and operating requirement. So let's talk a little bit about those. When you originally applied for the E2 visa, the marginality requirement was a business plan and maybe payroll documents for any current employees that you had. And for the most part, that was the business plan. Maybe a couple of days worth of sales, maybe a couple of contracts or something like that. But that was generally what they were looking for. Now, If you are applying for a renewal, they may want to see a new business plan again. In fact, I normally recommend it, especially if it's still a smaller business, right? If you still have fewer than 6 or 7 employees and you're still working on getting those profits going and getting the business as profitable as you'd like to see it, I recommend that you include a business plan again to show them not only how far you've come, but where you're still planning on going. Now, keep in mind that the consulates and USCIS, they really want to make sure that this business is operating profitably and has a E2 visa, or no, I'm sorry, that has US citizen or green card holder employees at 5 years. So the date that you started the business 5 years later, that's really kind of that crucial point. Obviously, anything you get before that 5 years will be great and will really help your odds of renewal. You know, they really want to make sure that you're working towards something that's sustainable, something that's what they call not marginal, and make sure that you've invested enough that the business is gonna really work. That's what they're looking for. So for the marginality on renewal, they're going to be looking for sure, 1099s, W-2s, payroll records, all of those things. They want to see the employment. There are no minimum number of employees that you have to have on staff. However, the more the merrier, right? As long as it makes sense. I normally recommend at least one employee for each of the first 5 years. So if you're doing a 5-year renewal, again, depending on what country you're from, having 5 employees would be great. Some people have to apply within a couple of years. So maybe having a couple of employees at that time. That's a rule of thumb. And, you know, if you're running a business that needs a lot more employees than that, then you'll probably have a lot more employees. Some businesses, maybe you'll have fewer, but you really should have employees on payroll at the time of the renewal and for some time before the renewal too. They don't want to see that you hired someone 6 weeks before your interview. They can kind of read through that a little bit. So keep those things in mind. The real and operating requirement, that's going to be really crucial here too. Now, if you've got employees and that type of thing, chances are the business is real and operational, but they're going to want to see that in the contracts or in the sales. You know, so your up-to-date financials will also be crucial in addition to tax returns, right? They want to see the last, usually most countries want to see the last 2 to 3 years of US tax returns. And then they want to see your up-to-date financials, right? So most people do not end up applying on April 15th, wherein, you know, all of your tax returns are due and all of that. So they want to see those up-to-date financials, usually 2 to 3 years worth of tax returns, 2 to 3 years worth of W-2s for your employees, things like that. Also, make sure that all your permits, all your insurance is up to date, that you still have customers or clients, you know, recent sales records, recent contracts, things like that. So that's really what a lot of the focus is going to be on. You know, so obviously, just like all E2 visa topics, I mean, we could go on and on about this for a couple of hours. That I'm not going to do that. Don't worry. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it relatively brief today. But of course, if you have any questions, reach out. But what I was going to say is that, you know, what do you do if you don't meet all of those requirements? Or what do you do if you meet some of them, but maybe they're not as strong, right? That's really a strategy session for you and your attorney to talk about. Like, hey, some of these things maybe we're a little weaker on. We only have 3 employees and been around for 5 years. What are our strengths? Well, we were really, really profitable and everybody was paid really well. Okay, maybe we point that out. Or maybe we have something in the business plan. Hey, 2020 was a disaster for obvious reasons. And that's probably true for most of you out there. 2021 was a building year. 2022 looked decent, but you know, we're still trying to get back to those 2019 numbers. Let's put that in the business plan. Talk to them about it. They're regular people. They will understand that things were really weird in 2021, right? They will know that. But let's make sure that we make it really clear for them that you're trending upward. That's a big thing too. So moving on to another topic, of course, you know, every single person is going to be a little bit different. with that, right? What their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And again, that's a strategy thing to talk about with your attorneys. What are the things we really point out here? What if you're weak on everything? Hey, how about investing some more money and showing that that's going toward marketing, or, something where it's like, hey, we're back in a building phase, right? And we've even invested more money to ensure that this business is going to continue to go. But what about strategies, or I'm sorry, what about changes to your business, right? What if you bought business A and you were approved, and then you bought business B, or you sold business A, or you started a different type of service, or now you're offering different products? Again, a lot of that is on a case by case basis and a country by country basis, right? So each consulate, there is something through the consulates and through USCIS where you're actually asking to kind of modify the E2 a little bit, right? But letting them know about the changes before they occur so they can say, okay, fine, and then move on. But I know from years of experience that investors many times don't do that. So it's really important to talk to your attorney. But certain things you want to make sure is that you always have a minimum of 50% ownership. The moment it drops below that, oh boy, you may have some real issues, okay? So you need to figure that out. Do not make that change without talking to your attorney. Other issues that I've seen come up is a change in EIN numbers, because the USCIS and in some instances the Department of State will see that and view those as two separate businesses. And they'll say, you were never approved for business 2. You were approved for business 1 with EIN number 111222. Now you're telling me you've got this business with EIN number 222333. Those aren't the same businesses. We never approved this business. Those are some things to be very cautious of. So something that I've run into a few times is accountants that are, bless their hearts, doing an amazing job in the world of accounting. And they want to change your LLC or C Corp to an S Corp because now you're a U.S. resident, tax resident. If the EIN changes, that could be big trouble for your immigration, right? So you got to talk those things through with your immigration attorney to figure out how to bridge that gap. And how can we explain that to the consulate and that type of thing, okay? Same with, so we talked about ownership. If you change from a 90% owner to a 70% owner, generally that can be pretty easily explained, but it needs to be explained. And we need to talk about, you're still directing and developing the business. You didn't take any of the money out. Your money's still at risk, things like that. Okay. Offering different goods or services, sometimes that can be easily explained, sometimes not. Buying additional businesses under the original, maybe that can be explained, maybe not. So really a lot of those things are going to be reaching out to your attorney. And I beg you, please, if you have not done this, but you are considering doing it, please don't do it until you've talked to your attorney. Please don't. You're going to save everybody a ton of heartache and heartbreak by talking to your attorney first, coming up with a strategy about how to buy an additional business or sell your old business or change ownership or something before you actually do it. So it's going to make everything a much smoother process. So with that, a few things that we have, Jenny. I'm going to read a couple of questions that we have, and then we're going to wrap. I don't want to bore all of you to death, for sure. Feel free to reach out anytime, rupertlawgroup.com. There's a form there you can fill out. You can call 323-434-4385. We're on WhatsApp. Do whatever you need to do. Jenny, so for a change of status, do they want a whole new application for extension, like in country extension? Yeah, it really depends. It really depends how you're applying, when you're applying, and what changes you've done to the business. So you really should talk to an attorney about that. If you're doing Department of State, depending again on the country that you're from, sometimes they have specifics. For USCIS, there's actually an I-129 blank on that form that asks, are you trying to make a substantial change to the business? And do you need guidance on whether you need to apply for a new E2 or not? So consider that as well. What if you did a 2-year change of status and an extension for 2 years? How many employees do you need to show? So again, there's never a a specific number of employees that you need to have, but you need to have some and the sum that makes sense. And general guidelines, again, at least one employee for every year of at least the first 5 years that you're in business. After that, sometimes you don't need more than 5 or 6 employees, and you can continue to run forever like that. But I generally talk about that. So it looks like I put my email there, which is fine. I think the most important thing is the phone number. Again, and it's WhatsApp or US, 323-434-4385, US code 1. And then, of course, rupertlawgroup.com, where you can fill out the form. So any questions that you may have about your renewal, we are happy to answer. And I thank you all so much for joining. Please reach out. We'll be happy to speak with all of you. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.